Fast becoming must-listen to radio and must-watch TV here in St. Louis. It's the boardroom. The board is in session. State Rep, House Majority Leader John Deihl, welcome back to Big 550 KTRS.
Thank you, McGraw.
Editorial page editor at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and local muckraker, Tony Messenger.
Good morning.
And former Chief of Staff to Governor Holden, Jane Dueker. Jane, good morning.
Good morning, McGraw.
What's your T-shirt say today?
My T-shirt says today it has a picture of Al Capone.
Yes.
And it says, I have built my organization on fear.
Thank you very much, Jane Dueker.
Yes.
Fear is a motivating factor, isn't it? That's right.
Yep.
All right.
Next on the board meeting, Geraldo will be here to
It's
find
opening
Jane
the
Dueker's
vault.
buried body
Exactly.
next to Jimmy Hoffa.
All right. So last night, Ellisville, this is a little bit of news. You were there. We should say that you were a lawyer for one of the parties involved in this Ellisville stuff.
Correct. I represent the citizens in both the impeachment lawsuit and on the conditional use permit.
And it seems like there was a little bit of story or a little bit of heated commentary yesterday in the meeting.
Yeah, I can honestly say I've never been to a city council meeting where it got that heated. So there was some very heated exchanges between the developer Sansone and Mayor Paul, and arguing over whether they had to issue or actually pass an ordinance to authorize the TIF notes should the conditions ever be met. And it got very ugly. There were threats. I mean, I think they said they weren't threatening, but
what threats? I mean,
threat that they're going to sue the
Okay.
council personally, and if they didn't issue the ordinance, and so it got ugly. And I mean, Mayor Paul stood up, but it was a difficult night. 11:30.
But it passed. This thing passed.
Well, no, they just did the first reading.
The first reading passed.
So they didn't do the second reading, and Sansone was demanding. I mean, make no mistake, it was demand that the ordinance be passed, but they didn't get that done last night. So I guess we'll have to see if the city sets another meeting.
So where does it stand now?
No different.
But I thought all this passed originally, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what
the
is
redevelopment agreement passed, and this is sort of a procedural deal where under the redevelopment agreement, Sansone is required to acquire all the property in the area, which they have not done.
Right.
They're required to have a lease with Walmart executed where there's an obligation for Walmart to open the store. So before the actual TIF notes can issue, those conditions have to be met. Well, but Sansone wants an ordinance authorizing the bonds or the notes to issue when those conditions are met. So it's sort of like almost like an advisory ordinance. And so, because right now those conditions haven't been met, and it's undisputed that they haven't met their obligations under the redevelopment agreement. And so the mayor's position is, well, why would we vote to have this ordinance now when I'd like to see if you're going to actually meet your obligations before we go ahead and pass this ordinance?
Can I just say one of the stupidest things about it, reading about it this morning in the Post-Dispatch? Since when was it good government to do first reading and second reading in the same meeting anyway?
Right.
The whole purpose of that process, that sort of legislative process, is to give councils and legislative bodies and citizens an opportunity to be heard. So you publish an agenda to say, first reading, we're going to bring this up, we're going to talk about it for the first time, and at our next meeting, next week or the month after or whatever, we'll do second reading. But when legislative bodies, and it happens occasionally in the Missouri Capitol, although not that frequently, or city councils, and I'm starting to see this more and more, decide to do first and second reading on the same night, just so that because some developer's pushing something through. Whether you like the Walmart or not, that's just bad government.
I agree.
The mayor was right to, slow that thing down.
Yeah, Tony and I agree with that. Actually, I have a little bit of experience. Before I served in the House, I was on the Board of Aldermen in the city of Town and Country, and I was sitting on a 4-4 board with the mayor breaking most ties.
Very similar.
And we dealt with the development at 141 in Clayton, where the Target is, and that was coming up, and it was the same type of thing, Tony. I agree with you. These developments get very emotionally charged. People don't like change on it, but at the same time, the landowners have some property rights. And you need to take it slow. You need to make sure that everybody has due process that can get out there and say their piece and try to work through those issues. That took about 1.5 years to actually get approved, and it turned out to be a pretty nice development up there that doesn't have a whole lot of complaints about it.
And this has been the biggest problem with what's going on in Ellisville from beginning to end is the lack of due process. Everything, I mean, the way that they tried to push the mayor out and the way that they tried to have that kangaroo court and everything lacking due process. You know what? If the pro-Walmart people can't win following the law and the due process and allowing the government to do its job, then they don't deserve it. I mean, something's going to get developed on that piece of property eventually. I live right by it.
And I think a lot of the residents are not anti-development, and I think they just said, well, first of all, we don't think they need money. Walmart does not need TIF money.
And the developer does. It's about the developer. It's not about Walmart.
Well, but that it doesn't work without Walmart. I mean, and Walmart could tell their developer we're done. But so Walmart,
I agree. I think that's part of the problem here is the amount and the fact that is a TIF necessary? Right. Are we creating more things? You know, the development I worked on when I was on the board in Town and Country, we took TIF off the table early. We said we're not doing it. And they built one in they did it anyway. And it's a beautiful
is building a Walmart without a TIF.
But there is some transportation something involved with that one up at Florissant.
Well, and there is here too. They want to do a CID, which is a community improvement and transportation.
So it's back to this thing last night. So Sansone is saying if this doesn't pass, they'll sue.
Oh yeah. If
it doesn't pass, does that mean it's off the table and the TIF isn't going to happen?
No. That's the funny thing about it is, I mean, and I never heard one legal reason why it had to pass last night. They never came up with anything in the redevelopment agreement or any legal reason why it had to be last night. No, it's not off the table. But the problem is, I think that Sansone basically admitted last night they were worried whether their conditional use permit was going to get upheld, and they don't want to buy property until they know. But the problem is, if you didn't file a good conditional use permit, you don't get to, not fulfill your side of the bargain.
So it sounds like what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Exactly. And, the problem is, I mean, they have a duty to do their stuff, and they don't want to, but, the conditional use permit is their problem.
House Majority Leader John Deihl, you sit and you watch this. Any help from the state on this? I mean, each one of these TIF things becomes more contentious and more contentious. Right. Is there ever going to be any help from the state on guidelines and sort of restrictions?
Well, there are guidelines, and part of the guidelines is that it's a local control issue right now, and I think that's probably where it needs to be. And the process in Ellisville, while it's ugly, seems to be working. Other communities are standing up and saying this isn't right for our community. Town and Country said no at 141 in Clayton, as you point out. Florissant said no. Sunset Hills has turned them down in the past too. The difficult part is it seems like what a lot of people want to do up in Jeff City is just get rid of TIFs that involve Walmarts, and that involves union issues versus non-union issues, but they still want to be able to use them for other types of projects.
But that's not what's been proposed in Jefferson City. What's been proposed in Jefferson City and gets killed in the House every year is a proposal that takes the TIF commissions that already exist and gives them more power, because those TIF commissions represent the citizens in all of the districts who lose their tax money to the municipalities. And the municipalities kill it, and it's wrong. Those TIF commissions deserve to have slightly more power so that all of the citizens in the fire districts and everything else get a say in these TIFs. And that's a simple bill that has majority support that can't be brought up for a vote.
Oh, that's not true, actually. We did bring it up for a vote on the floor. That bill made it to an amendment, and the bill was voted down because there are other things on it. So that's not a true statement. And number two, it doesn't empower the countywide TIF commission is empowered right now. The question is whether or not you give the countywide TIF commission veto power over what local governments want to do.
Well, right now it's the opposite. Right now the city council has veto power over all those other districts.
If there's a super majority, I'm not disagreeing with the outcome, but the question is who has control. And if you don't think that county government, the way it does right now, is going to approve union projects and not approve non-union projects, I think you're a little misguided, and that's what this is about.
I don't think the TIF commissions have anything to do with a union situation.
Oh, sure they do. Who populates the countywide TIF commission? Who makes all the appointments to it? It's the county executive.
Right.
Okay, so you're giving the county executive veto power over all TIFs.
Well, you could say that about any board and commission, and I think that the fact that the county says, wait a minute, let's look here and see if we want to let a Walmart or whatever development just go down Manchester Road and pick up TIF money each way. And so what happens is, but you get a city like Ellisville, they see dollar signs in their eyes, and they say, okay, we'll play the border war, and we'll fight with Wildwood, we'll fight with Baldwin. And
Manchester does
or
it.
Manchester, right? And they poach each other. And the whole idea behind the countywide was to say, look, we're not going to do this anymore because it doesn't make the pie bigger; it just moves it.
Right. And what we propose, which I think makes sense, is that you take the items which are essential that everybody has to buy. You cross borders to buy food, for example, being the one that's the driving factor in this. You take food out of the calculation for an economic activity tax, which funds the TIF if the countywide TIF commission turns it down. So you stop the border wars of people poaching grocery stores and poaching Walmarts from one to the other.
Well, it's retail.
That's John Deihl. We're going to leave it there. That's John Deihl. Tony Messenger with us and Jane Dueker as well. We're going to come back and talk parking meters, NSA, and a lot more. Stick around. 9:19, make it 9:20 here on the board meeting. The board meeting is in session. That is Tony Messenger, editorial page editor of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Jane Dueker is wearing her best Al Capone T-shirt.
Yep.
And House Majority Leader John Deihl is classing up the joint. We'll start with you this segment.
Cufflinks. Yeah.
House Majority Leader John Deihl. What are your thoughts as you sit and you watch this NSA national story take hold? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's it's fascinating. Every generation has struggles with technology and how it plays into the fabric of our society. I think there's a lot of we're clearly going. I think it's no secret to anybody that anything that you do electronically, somebody is probably collecting and storing that data.
Right.
I mean, there's no doubt. I get on Google, and the next time I go on and ads and searches pop up for this type of clothing that I looked for, the day before pops up.
Yep.
Yeah, and then there's a big brother. I mean, what gets really disturbing about it, there's always a fine line between commerce doing it and what not the government's doing it, and how that gets used. On the other hand, I think the argument is that the terrorists, that is their way and method of communicating, and that's proven. It bothers me a little bit with the layering, quite a bit of the layering of appears to be some targeting on the IRS side with political enemies and whatnot, and how that information is being used, what the policies are. I think there needs to be quite a bit of transparency on how data is collected, what is in bounds and what is out of bounds, and have a pretty good public discussion on how that is to be done.
Do you believe the government when they say that 50 different terrorist attacks have been thwarted by the NSA program?
I don't have any reason to disbelieve that. My question would be, could they also be thwarted by other mechanisms? We know that there's many different ways. So something can be thwarted by 2 or 3 different mechanisms. Now, I think there's some level of surveillance on that type of activity is necessary. But on the other hand, is it necessary to collect data from every phone call that everybody makes to your mother, brother, sister that has no ties and no plausible tie to outside of the country or to terrorist cells?
Tony Messenger, what are your thoughts?
I think the debate over the collection of the materials is over. The train's left the station. The American public, through our commerce, through our use of our iPhones and everything else, and look at what we do on this show, trying to put it all out there in digital bits. We've sort of given up that element of our freedom to some degree. The debate has to be over how that material is used and what are the protections and what are the checks and balances. And that's where there is wide agreement on the left and the right that they're not sure that they can trust that the government is protecting this material fairly. And what really needs to happen right now, because after the Patriot Act under a Republican president, and now after this NSA stuff under a Democratic president, and people in all parts of the political spectrum having some problem with this, it's time for a national debate over going all the way back to the Patriot Act and doing the best we can as a nation. And it's next to impossible these days, but the best we can as a nation in having just that nonpartisan debate over what are the freedoms that we're willing to give up, because that's the balancing act in order to protect ourselves. And that's the debate that has to happen, and it has to happen outside the realm of partisanship, because it's happened now under both a Republican president and a Democratic president, and Congress has been complicit. At least some members of Congress has been complicit, and that's what needs to happen. Congress needs to assert its authority and have this debate, not a witch hunt, but an actual debate over what is the level of privacy that Americans expect. And where is that balancing act?
Not only did Congress know, but they've known for many years.
That's the problem I have.
They've known for years. And last week they had a special NSA meeting,
briefing, yeah.
and 50-some-odd senators went home for the weekend and didn't even go to this special briefing. So how outraged can they be if they don't even go to these briefings?
That's the thing that makes me mad is, none of these congressmen who are complaining about the NSA and none of the people moaning about it are saying, oh, by the way, let's repeal the Patriot Act. I mean, this has been going on since 9/11. I mean, so the outrage is a little ridiculous. Where were you when it was authorized and reauthorized a second time? So I agree with Tony. Let's quit the outrage. Let's quit the political posturing and say, okay, what part of the Patriot Act went too far? Because none of these congressmen want to get up and say, ooh, I'm going to vote against, going after the terrorists. They don't want to talk about it in terms of the Patriot Act because that's a real political problem.
I think,
and there's a court that oversees this program.
But it's also not only how it's how it's enforced and how
I agree.
How it's used.
And put standards. Okay. But I
don't want to concede the point that we're beyond the point where stuff's collected. I mean, we know with anything, is particularly with the development of commerce and stuff, we're moving toward e-commerce, no doubt. But are people really making informed choices that when I click or I do this, that I am agreeing? And it's all in the terms of services and their contracts of adhesion. And people probably don't read it. They're not public. They're not focused. They're not properly disclosed. I think there's a higher level of awareness that the companies that go out and sell your data and collect it. I'm not sure the average consumer has an expectation that because I click on Sears.com to buy something that they're going to turn around and sell this stuff to everybody. Now, I think they probably think Sears does it and maybe the product that buys, but can it be used for multiple other purposes? And I think there can be a fair amount of additional disclosures and notifications to
that
consumers.
Sounds like government regulation, John.
Be careful.
No, I don't. I think that there's nothing wrong with protecting consumers and protecting consumers in the marketplace.
I think part of it is a
illegal.
generational thing. We had a debate on the editorial board pre-NSA about sort of the privacy issues and the release of information. And my two editorial board colleagues, Kevin Horgan and Deb Peterson, are both a little bit older than I am, and they were less comfortable than I was with just this understanding that
it's all out there.
It's all out there, and that's just sort of the way it is these days.
Here's my problem. I have a problem with our foreign policy being based on who's in the White House, and that when Bush is in office, Obama runs as I'm going to close Guantanamo Bay. Drones are terrible. This and that. The Patriot Act is this. He gets into office and he reauthorizes the Patriot Act. He does the drone program on steroids, and he keeps Guantanamo Bay open. And all of a sudden now he's a bad guy because he's keeping Guantanamo Bay open and he has drone strikes. But now it's coming from the Republican Party.
Right.
It's situational foreign policy, and that's what's dangerous.
Yep. And I think that's why here I would like to strip it all and say, look, let's look at the Patriot Act, people. I mean, this is what you authorized him to do. No one's saying it's illegal. Nobody's going to court trying to shut this down because, by the way, the court, FISA, already looked at this. And so if the standards aren't enough and there isn't enough oversight by Congress, then step up.
And it's
time.
Congress should step up the oversight of it. Absolutely. And I would push back on whether it was authorized or not. That's what needs to be.
Well, then Congress needs to reassert itself.
Tony Messenger, Jane Dueker, John Deihl. Back in a moment. The board meeting on the Big 550, KTRS, and STLtoday.com. 9:38 here. The board meeting in session. State Rep House Majority Leader John Deihl, Tony Messenger, and Jane Dueker. Tony, we'll start with you. Nick Pister broke the cover off this story earlier in the week that the city of St. Louis will be charging for their parking meters on Saturdays. What are your thoughts?
As I wrote in the Post-Dispatch this morning, I think it's much ado about nothing. Almost every major city charges for parking on Saturdays. The charge in St. Louis is less than most. The Treasurer Tashara Jones already ended the tradition of free parking on opening day. And here's the most important thing. The only people that it primarily is going to affect negatively is Cardinals fans. But there's only one more Saturday afternoon game the rest of the season that would possibly be affected, because the rest of the Saturday games are at 6:15. So the parking paid parking ends at 7 o'clock, so it won't have an effect there. And the one game is the day of the Veiled Prophet Fair. There's not going to be any parking downtown anyway that day. So I just don't think it's a big deal.
Well, then why do it? I mean,
because they already charge everywhere else in the city. Why should downtown be any different?
Well, because I think it's very simple. Is that downtown struggles to get people downtown, particularly on the weekends. And this is not a city. I think you look at most shopping and regional attractions, this is not a city that likes to pay for parking.
But the business community that is attracting people downtown wants this, because the bars and the restaurants and the retail establishments that exist downtown want people to have to move their cars because it's better for their customers.
I understood that, but the customers typically will not come if they have to pay for parking. We need to be setting up policies right now that encourage people and make it easy for people to travel downtown the city of St. Louis if we're going to revive the shopping and the restaurants and the bars and those types of things. You can also fix that same problem that bars and restaurants have by not charging, but saying you can only park there for 2 hours. You can walk around and you can tag wheels and chalk cars. It's just, we saw that's one of the problems I think Union Station has always struggled with, because they try to charge for parking for people to go eat at a Hard Rock Cafe or whatnot, and this city just won't do that.
What makes St. Louis different than Chicago, San Francisco, New York, all the other cities?
Because people want to go downtown in St. Louis. I mean,
free parking is what does it?
Well, no, but it's a layer of things. Okay, it's a layer of things. It's an environment. I mean, you can't compare St. Louis's downtown to Chicago's downtown or San Francisco's downtown. People live in those downtowns. They don't.
And they're starting to live here. Some of
they're starting to.
St. Louis has some of
because
the
of free parking on Saturday.
People coming down.
It's because of the free parking on Saturday.
And the people that live here
this
probably
drive them
out.
I think
what's the fiscal note on this? I mean, there's got to be.
They make a little bit of money. I don't think I don't know what the number is. The treasurer says it's not that much money. It's not so much about the bottom line. It's about fairness. They're doing it in Central West End. Why should the Central West End be charging for parking on Saturday?
Does Clayton charge? I didn't think Clayton doesn't charge on Saturday.
As the only person in this panel who actually lives downtown and who is affected by this strong arm of the law coming down and telling me that I have to plug nickels now and quarters into the machine, I don't mind you charging me, but how about being a little responsive to the 21st century? I don't carry around nickels and dimes and quarters anymore.
Put the machines in.
Put the machines
where
in.
you can buy a parking card, which is good.
Throw us a bone. I mean, please.
Right. I like the new machines in Clayton where you go and you just put your money in or a credit card or whatever, and then you have your ticket.
Go stick it on there.
And it's so much easier because you don't want to go out there and, and like you say, find nickels and have change in your car. And a parking ticket downtown is a lot more expensive than it is in the county. And so if you don't have nickels in your car, you're paying $25 to park at a meter. And, that's,
just won't.
One of those meters coming in, one of those.
$10 parking ticket downtown.
Well, yeah. Some of them are 20.
But you have to pay it. But if they have a picture of you with the expired meter, then you don't have to pay.
And so what? We're gonna have everybody else on that one Saturday. I wonder what that fiscal note's
going
to be.
I
wonder what the fiscal note's going to be.
But I'm with you on upgrading the technology. I think that would make it easier.
I wonder what the fiscal note's going to be on that Saturday with the Cardinals game. Is everybody going to leave the Cardinals game in the 6th inning to go out and plug some more nickels in the meter? Or are they going to get a $25?
It'll be like a Mizzou Tiger game where Memorial Stadium empties out at halftime. Everybody goes back to their cars and drinks, and then comes back in.
Another similar change in policy is going to affect downtown St. Louis, and I think that is the NFL recently came out and announced that women have to now use a clear plastic carry-on bag to walk into the Edward Jones Dome. Yes, this is a sexist comment. We'll start with Jane Dueker first. Jane, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I just don't get it. I mean, okay, so what has changed? What I do think it's asinine. I really do. I don't know why it appears sexist. I don't know why they want to send that message that women now have to carry clear purses. And I don't know
what will you do with your Rams tickets? Will you go to a Rams game now?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to switch purses to go to a football game. It's a practical problem. I mean, I'm going to have to like I'm going to the airport. That's why I always check my luggage, because I don't want to go through the hassle of putting everything in a plastic bag and going through security. And so you're going to make me do that again now to go to a football game. So women have to change purses or not have a purse to go to a football game. I don't understand why now. It's been, how long since 9/11? I mean, what are we protecting against?
They're doing this because of the Boston bombings.
I understand, but I mean, I don't understand how, having clear purses is going to translate into preventing the Boston bombing. I mean, I just don't.
Or they not let people wear winter coats in.
Right. I mean, where does
pockets,
that,
you have a side. I mean, what difference is a purse? It's 4 by 4 inches.
I think it's economic development.
Well,
I think if the downtown Macy's
sells
selling clear purses, they'd stay in
No
business.
woman wants to show everybody what's in their purse. I mean, I know I don't.
I don't want to see what's in that
right.
purse.
I think Jane's biggest problem is you're going to have to get one of those leg flasks now.
Evidently.
But you're going to have to attach it to your leg instead of
now you're going to know what I'm
purse.
drinking, or I'm going to have like a paper bag.
Right.
That's been a question. Inquiring minds have wanted to know that for a year. What have you been drinking all these years?
What's in that
Wow.
cup?
I'm here, aren't I?
But women will not change purses, leave their purse in the car, and then during the game, the bad guys are going to go breaking into cars all day long because the purses
They know
are in
the
there.
purses are there.
But the good part is we're now going to have people enforcing traffic meters.
That's exactly
so
right.
there'll be more law enforcement on the street.
Are they
going to
stop the break-ins? Okay.
That's John Deihl, Tony Messenger, Jane Dueker. Come back with our parting shot. We'll do that next. The board meeting each and every Thursday here on the Big 550 KTRS. Jane Dueker is the former Chief of Staff of Governor Holden. John Deihl is the House Majority Leader, and Tony Messenger is the editorial page editor. Our parting shots, Tony, we'll start with you.
There was an interesting donation in the political world that got Republicans and Democrats all a Twitter this week. Steve Tilley, the former House Speaker, who's now a lobbyist and political consultant and maintains a campaign account of about $1 million, gave a $7,500 donation to Chris Koster, the Attorney General. What's interesting is Tilley is a Republican and raised most of his money from Republicans. And so Republicans, including the President Pro Tem of the Senate, Tom Dempsey, were ticked off that Steve Tilley would give money to a Democrat. They missed the point. Whether or not Republicans and Democrats give money to each other, frankly, it happens all the time. Corporations give to both parties as a matter of course, is no big deal. What is a big deal is that the former speaker, who's also a lobbyist and also a political consultant, is allowed to use a campaign fund to launder all of this money going in and out of various campaign issues. My hope is that that donation, for the wrong reasons, becomes the spur to some ethics reform in the next legislative session.
That is editorial page editor at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Tony Messenger. Next up, House Majority Leader John Deihl.
I'm going to focus on how we keep having a tendency to punish and make it harder for law-abiding people to live their daily lives, whether it's this issue of women having to have plastic purses into seeing a Rams game, having just ordinary citizens having all of their phone records collected by the government, the pseudo-federal stuff we talked about a few weeks ago. Why are law-abiding citizens paying the punishment by having to get prescriptions for that type of stuff? The focus of government needs to be on going after those who are clearly the wrongdoings, and not give people a false sense of security. There's a fine line between security and freedom. You can be very, very secure, but it doesn't mean that you're free and that you have a whole lot of freedom. And it just seems like we have too many times in the society we tend to gravitate toward what's the easy to sell, give people a false sense of security that we're actually doing something instead of actually going after the bad guys.
That is State Rep House Majority Leader John Deihl. And finally, former Chief of Staff of Governor Holden, and one heck of a nice lady, Jane Dueker.
I think I want to focus on transparency. I mean, when we talk about campaign finance that Tony mentions, and I talk about what happened in Ellisville last night and how, out there emails are being deleted automatically, and, the Sunshine Law is sort of like a punchline. I would like to see government force itself to be more transparent. I'd like citizens to stand up and demand transparency. I think that, again, they do the convenient thing and means justify the ends, and you shove things down people's throat. And I think that transparency is what makes people uncomfortable. And the more transparent government can be, the better off everybody is. And so I think we would avoid a lot of problems with just transparency. And so Sunshine Law, let's get some more teeth in that thing.
Jane Dueker, while we have a moment here left, I want to go back to something, the Ellisville, since it was news last night. Where does this stand now? What's the next move for Ellisville and this TIF and everything?
Well, we still have the Court of Appeals case where they're going to determine whether the conditional use permit was properly issued. The TIF note ordinance still needs to be second read and passed, and so Sandstone's demanding a special meeting for that. So that would be the next step there. And then last night also the city council passed a resolution to have Walmart and Sandstone come in and explain to the citizens and them what has actually happened on this project, where it stands on property acquisition, on all the things that need to be done, so that people can be informed.
Did that pass?
Yes,
so
it did.
So in the near future,
yes,
the developer and Walmart's going to come in,
yes,
and give a detailed report.
Yes, and citizens, council members, and any interested party are allowed to submit written questions of things they want answered. So that ought to be very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Jane Dueker, former Chief of Staff, Tony Messenger, editorial page editor of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and House Majority Leader John Deihl. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Have a good week.
Thank you, McGraw. See you next week.